In modern American politics, money is more than just fuel for campaigns. It is a signal of power, momentum, and credibility. Few moments illustrate this reality more clearly than the latest fundraising revelations in the Texas Democratic Senate primary. As 2026 begins, a new financial picture has emerged, placing James Talarico in a commanding position while raising serious questions about Jasmine Crockett's path forward. Fundraising totals are often the first real test of a candidate's strength. They reflect donor confidence, organizational capacity, and the perceived viability of a campaign. In this race, the numbers tell a striking story. While Jasmine Crockett raised an impressive amount in the weeks following her campaign launch, James Talarico's fundraising operation moved at a dramatically different scale, outpacing Crockett by a wide margin and reshaping the narrative of the contest. This development has transformed what many initially viewed as a personality-driven race into a financial showdown. The Texas Senate primary is no longer just about messaging, ideology, or media presence. It is now unmistakably about resources, who has them, who controls them, and how effectively they can be deployed. For Jasmine Crockett, the news presents a complex challenge. Her political rise has been fueled by visibility, sharp rhetoric, and a growing national profile. Supporters point to her ability to dominate headlines, generate viral moments, and mobilize grassroots enthusiasm. These strengths helped her raise millions in a short period, demonstrating that she remains a formidable figure within the Democratic Party. Yet fundraising is a relative game. In competitive primaries, it is not enough to raise a large sum. What matters is how that sum compares to rivals. In this case, the contrast is stark. Talarico's financial advantage signals something deeper than raw dollars. It suggests institutional confidence, donor alignment, and long-term campaign planning at a scale that cannot be ignored. The phrase war chest is often used loosely in political coverage, but in this context, it is entirely appropriate. A large war chest allows a campaign to dominate early advertising, build robust ground operations, hire top-tier strategists, and respond quickly to attacks or shifts in the political environment. It also sends a message to undecided voters and party insiders. This campaign is serious, prepared, and built to last. For Talarico, the fundraising edge represents validation of his strategy. While he may lack Crockett's national media presence, his ability to attract significant financial support suggests that donors see him as a credible, disciplined, and potentially unifying candidate. In politics, donor behavior often reflects strategic calculations. Where money flows, confidence usually follows. This shift places Crockett in a more defensive position. While her fundraising numbers remain strong by most standards, the comparison invites scrutiny. Analysts and voters alike begin asking difficult questions. Can her campaign sustain momentum without matching her rivals' financial firepower? Will national attention compensate for a resource gap on the ground? And how will this imbalance shape the next phase of the race? The timing of these fundraising disclosures adds another layer of significance. Early in a campaign cycle, financial dominance can create a snowball effect. Strong fundraising attracts media coverage, which in turn attracts more donors, endorsements, and organizational support. For Talarico, the early lead positions him as a candidate with momentum, potentially reshaping perceptions among undecided voters. For Crockett, the challenge is narrative control. Her supporters may argue that money is not everything, that energy, authenticity, and voter enthusiasm matter more. This argument has merit, particularly in an era where grassroots movements can disrupt traditional power structures. However, statewide races in Texas remain expensive, complex operations. Advertising markets are costly, travel is extensive, and voter outreach requires sustained investment. The fundraising gap also introduces the possibility of strategic contrast. Talarico's campaign may frame itself as stable, well-organized, and broadly supported, while subtly positioning Crockett as more polarizing or dependent on media attention. Crockett's campaign, in turn, may emphasize grassroots enthusiasm, outsider energy, and resistance to establishment influence. This dynamic sets the stage for a philosophical clash as much as a financial one. Beyond the immediate race, these numbers matter because they shape expectations. Fundraising reports influence endorsements, media framing, and even debate dynamics. A candidate perceived as financially dominant often receives more serious consideration, while those trailing face heightened scrutiny. This reality places added pressure on Crockett to demonstrate strength in other areas: polling, turnout, or public engagement. At the same time, it would be a mistake to declare the race decided based solely on early fundraising. Political history is filled with examples of well-funded campaigns that failed to connect with voters, and underfunded campaigns that defied expectations. However, money creates opportunity, and right now, Talarico has more of it. As the Texas Senate primary enters its next phase, the focus will increasingly shift from who can generate attention to who can sustain a campaign. Fundraising is not just a metric, it is a strategic weapon. How each candidate wields it will shape the trajectory of the race in the months ahead. If you want clear, in-depth analysis of political power struggles, money in politics, and the races shaping America's future, make sure to subscribe. Upcoming segments will break down how this fundraising gap affects strategy, voter perception, and the ultimate outcome of the Texas Senate primary. Jasmine Crockett entered the Texas Senate race with momentum, recognition, and a growing national profile. Her rise in Democratic politics has been shaped by visibility, direct confrontation, and an ability to command attention in a crowded political landscape. For many supporters, she represents a new generation of leadership, unapologetic, outspoken, and willing to challenge power directly. However, the emergence of a significant fundraising gap has altered the terrain of the race. While Crockett raised millions in a relatively short period, the comparison with James Talarico's larger war chest has introduced new pressure points. In high-stakes statewide contests, perception often matters as much as reality, and the financial contrast has become a central talking point among analysts, donors, and voters. Crockett's strength lies in her ability to shape narratives. She is skilled at reframing challenges as evidence of independence and resistance to entrenched interests. Supporters argue that her fundraising totals reflect genuine grassroots enthusiasm rather than reliance on institutional backing. This framing positions her campaign as people-powered, driven by energy and conviction rather than financial dominance. Yet the demands of a Texas Senate race are unforgiving. The state's vast geography, expensive media markets, and diverse electorate require sustained investment. Advertising, voter outreach, staffing, and logistical coordination all depend on reliable funding. The existence of a fundraising disadvantage, even a relative one, forces difficult strategic decisions about where and how resources are deployed. For Crockett, this moment tests the balance between visibility and infrastructure. Her campaign's ability to generate viral moments and media attention can partially offset financial limitations, but it cannot fully replace the need for organized, on-the-ground operations. The question is whether her visibility can translate into turnout at a scale sufficient to overcome a resource gap. Another dimension of pressure comes from expectations. Crockett's supporters see her as a frontrunner, a candidate capable of reshaping Texas politics and elevating progressive voices on the national stage. When a candidate with such expectations appears financially outpaced, scrutiny intensifies. Every decision, from messaging to scheduling, is evaluated through the lens of whether the campaign can maintain competitiveness. At the same time, Crockett's fundraising numbers are not insignificant. Raising millions early in a campaign signals viability and donor confidence. The challenge is not lack of support, but relative positioning. In a head-to-head comparison, even strong performance can appear weaker if a rival's numbers dominate the conversation. This dynamic creates an opportunity as well as a risk. Crockett's campaign can use the contrast to sharpen its message, emphasizing authenticity and independence. By highlighting grassroots contributions and small donor support, the campaign can argue that political power should not be measured solely by dollars. This narrative resonates with voters skeptical of money's influence in politics. However, the effectiveness of this approach depends on execution. Messaging must be consistent, disciplined, and tied to tangible outcomes. Voters may appreciate rhetoric about grassroots energy, but they also expect competence, organization, and the ability to win. Bridging this gap requires translating enthusiasm into action, voter registration, turnout, and sustained engagement. Crockett's media presence remains a critical asset. Her appearances, statements, and public engagements continue to attract attention, ensuring that her voice remains central to the race. In an era where attention is currency, this visibility has real value. It keeps her campaign in the public eye and maintains relevance even as financial narratives shift. The pressure also extends to endorsements and alliances. Fundraising performance influences how potential endorsers assess risk and opportunity. While Crockett retains support from influential figures, the emergence of a financially dominant rival may cause some stakeholders to hesitate, weighing the likelihood of victory before committing. Ultimately, this phase of the campaign represents a defining test for Crockett. It challenges her to demonstrate that visibility, authenticity, and voter connection can compete with financial power. How she responds, through messaging, strategy, and organization, will shape perceptions of her leadership and resilience. For voters, this contrast offers a clear choice. Crockett embodies a style of politics rooted in confrontation and visibility, while her opponent emphasizes financial strength and organizational discipline. The fundraising gap sharpens this distinction, forcing voters to consider what qualities they value most in a candidate. As the race progresses, the pressure on Crockett will intensify. Success will depend on her ability to convert attention into action and passion into turnout. Whether this approach can overcome a financial disadvantage remains an open question, one that will be answered not in headlines, but at the ballot box. To stay informed on how this race evolves and what it reveals about power, money, and influence in American politics, make sure to subscribe. Upcoming segments will examine how these dynamics affect voter behavior and the broader implications for the Texas Senate race. As the Texas Democratic Senate primary moves forward, the contrast between Jasmine Crockett and James Talarico has become sharper and more consequential. What began as a contest of personalities and political styles has evolved into a clear test of power, resources, and strategy. At the center of this test lies a fundamental question. In modern American politics, how much does money really matter? The fundraising gap revealed at the start of 2026 has reshaped the narrative of the race. James Talarico's sizable war chest has positioned him as a disciplined, well-organized contender with the financial capacity to sustain a long and demanding campaign. Jasmine Crockett, meanwhile, remains a highly visible and influential figure whose strength lies in messaging, media presence, and grassroots enthusiasm. Together, these dynamics define a race that is no longer predictable or one-dimensional. Money, in this context, functions as both a tool and a signal. It allows campaigns to invest in advertising, staffing, voter outreach, and rapid response. At the same time, it communicates confidence to voters, donors, and party insiders. Talarico's financial advantage signals preparedness and long-term viability, potentially attracting further support and reinforcing a cycle of momentum. Yet history offers countless examples of well-funded campaigns failing to secure victory. Money opens doors, but it does not guarantee connection. Crockett's supporters argue that her ability to mobilize voters, generate attention, and articulate a clear political vision can offset financial disparities. In a polarized environment, enthusiasm and turnout can be decisive factors, particularly in primaries where voter participation is often limited. This tension highlights the broader stakes of the race. Voters are not simply choosing between two individuals, they are choosing between two philosophies of political power. One emphasizes structure, resources, and measured advancement. The other prioritizes visibility, confrontation, and grassroots energy. The outcome will reflect which approach resonates more strongly with Democratic voters in Texas at this moment in history. The race also carries implications beyond the primary. Texas remains a key battleground state, and the candidate emerging from this contest will face intense scrutiny in the general election. Fundraising strength, organizational capacity, and voter appeal will all be tested on a larger stage. The decisions made during the primary will shape not only the candidates' trajectories, but also the broader strategy of the party in the state. As the campaign progresses, attention will shift from raw numbers to outcomes. How effectively does Talarico deploy his resources? Can Crockett translate attention into turnout? Which campaign adapts more quickly to changing conditions and voter sentiment? These questions will determine whether financial dominance or narrative control proves more powerful. For undecided voters, the fundraising battle offers insight into each candidate's approach to leadership. Talarico's financial edge suggests stability and planning, while Crockett's performance underscores resilience and the ability to compete under pressure. Both qualities are valued in politics, and the primary serves as a forum for evaluating which matters more to the electorate. In the end, this race underscores a central truth of American democracy. Elections are shaped by both resources and relationships. Money amplifies messages, but voters ultimately decide whether those messages resonate. The Texas Senate primary, defined by its financial contrasts and strategic choices, will offer a revealing case study in how power is built and exercised in modern politics. As voters prepare to cast their ballots, the stakes are clear. This is not merely a contest for a Senate seat, but a referendum on how political influence is earned and deployed. The outcome will echo beyond Texas, informing debates about campaign strategy, party identity, and the role of money in shaping political futures. To stay informed on major political power shifts, campaign strategies, and the stories shaping America's political landscape, make sure to subscribe. By following, viewers gain access to clear, in-depth analysis that goes beyond headlines and into the forces driving real change.